What if the biggest celebrity relationship story of the year isn't the one you've been seeing online? What if the smiling photos, public appearances, and carefully timed headlines were hiding a much darker situation unfolding behind the scenes? Because right now, Cardi B and Stefon are at the center of a controversy that's raising serious questions across social media, entertainment blogs, and sports circles alike. Just when it looked like the noise surrounding Diggs had finally started to fade, a former insider stepped forward with explosive claims that instantly reignited the conversation and pulled Cardi B directly into the spotlight. What makes this story so shocking isn't just the allegations themselves. It's the timing, the resurfaced messages, the public confrontations, the courtroom drama, and a growing list of people who suddenly seem willing to speak out after staying silent for months. As more details emerge, fans are starting to connect dots that many believe were hiding in plain sight all along. Some think this is a calculated attempt to damage reputations. Others believe it's the beginning of a much bigger story that hasn't fully come out yet. And if that's true, then what happens next could change the public perception of everyone involved. Because by the end of this story, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. The headlines may have only revealed a fraction of what's really going on. The moment this situation started spiraling online, it didn't feel like a normal celebrity rumor cycle anymore. It felt heavier, more complicated, like every new update was stacking on top of the last one without giving anyone time to breathe or even verify what was real and what was being added by the internet. Cardi B has always lived her life in the public eye, but this time the conversation around her wasn't just about music, success, or her usual headline-making personality. Instead, her name got pulled into a storm involving Stefon, a high-profile NFL star whose personal life has already been under a microscope for months. And once those two names got tied together in the same narrative, social media basically exploded into non-stop speculation. It all started gaining traction again when a former associate of Diggs began making claims online that immediately reignited old conversations people thought were already buried. According to those allegations being shared across platforms, there were serious accusations tied to past relationships, including claims that quickly spread through blogs and gossip pages. Nothing about it was simple, nothing about it was clean, and nothing about it came with clarity that people could easily trust. And that's exactly why this situation took off the way it did. Because the internet doesn't just react to news anymore, it investigates it in real time, builds theories, and connects dots whether those dots actually belong together or not. Within hours, old clips, old posts, and old interviews started resurfacing, all being pulled into one massive storyline that suddenly felt bigger than just one incident or one claim. Stefon, who has already been dealing with public scrutiny around his personal relationships and off-field attention, found himself right back in the center of conversation. But this time, it wasn't just sports fans talking. It was entertainment blogs, celebrity watchers, and even people who normally don't follow NFL drama suddenly paying attention. And then Cardi B's name entered the conversation more directly, not through a formal statement, not through an interview, but through the way social media started linking timelines, appearances, and past interactions into one continuous narrative. Some users began suggesting connections, others pushed back hard, and within that clash of opinions, the story grew even more chaotic. Because once Cardi B is involved in anything, the entire entertainment world pays attention. What made things even more intense was the timing of everything happening around Diggs' public life. He had already been dealing with criticism, media pressure, and constant speculation about his relationships and public image. So when these new claims surfaced, people immediately started reevaluating everything they thought they knew about him. Every public appearance, every handshake, every interview moment suddenly got reinterpreted through a different lens. But the problem is, none of it came with clear confirmation. Everything existed in that uncomfortable space between allegation, rumor, and interpretation. And that's where things started getting messy. Because while some people were treating the situation like an open-end shut case based on online posts, others were pointing out that nothing had been officially proven in the way social media was describing it. Still, that didn't slow anything down. If anything, The uncertainty made it spread faster. Then came the resurfaced conversations about Diggs' personal history, including past headlines about relationships, public criticism, and moments that had already been heavily discussed in sports media before. All of that started getting pulled back into the spotlight, as if the internet was building a full timeline from scratch in real time. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, Cardi B's connection to the broader conversation became the most sensitive and most talked about angle. Not because of confirmed details, but because of how quickly her name amplifies any situation she's attached to. Fans started debating whether she was being unfairly dragged into something unrelated, while others insisted there were overlapping personal links that needed attention. At the same time, media platforms started picking up on the trend. Some outlets focused on Diggs and the allegations being discussed online, while others focused more on the reaction, the speculation, and the way social media was driving the narrative faster than official responses could even catch up. It created two different versions of the story, depending on where you were reading it. One version made it look like a developing personal controversy tied to serious accusations and unanswered questions. The other made it look like a rapidly evolving internet rumor cycle fueled by resurfaced content and public curiosity. And both versions were competing for attention at the same time. As this unfolded, fans started analyzing everything. Old interviews were replayed. Past relationships were revisited. Even casual public interactions were being studied frame by frame, as if they contained hidden meaning. That's how quickly the narrative escalated from isolated claims into a full-blown public discussion. And yet, through all of it, there was still no single confirmed storyline that tied everything together in a clean or official way. That didn't stop people from building theories, though. In fact, it encouraged it. Because when a situation involves major celebrities like Cardi B and Stefon Diggs, the internet doesn't wait for clarity. It fills in the gaps itself. The most interesting part, though, is how divided the reactions became. One side of the audience believes there's far more beneath the surface than what's being publicly acknowledged. They point to timing, resurfaced posts, and emotional reactions from people connected to the situation as signs that something deeper is going on. The other side argues that this is exactly how misinformation spreads, by turning unverified claims into entertainment content before any facts are established. And right in the middle of those two perspectives is where this story continues to grow. Because as more voices join the conversation, more fragments are being added. Screenshots appear, old clips resurface, and commentary videos start breaking down every detail like it's a courtroom case unfolding online. But even then, no one could agree on what actually matters and what's just noise. Still, the pressure keeps building, especially around Diggs, who now finds himself dealing with a public narrative that extends far beyond football. It's no longer just about performance on the field or headlines in sports media. It's about personal reputation, public perception, and how quickly an online story can take on a life of its own. And Cardi B's involvement in the broader discussion only intensifies that pressure, even if much of it is coming from speculation rather than verified statements. But just when it seemed like the situation might start slowing down or getting clarified, something else began circulating online that shifted the entire conversation again. A new wave of posts, new interpretations of past interactions, and new claims being repeated across platforms started pushing the story into an even more complicated direction. And that's where everything takes a turn, because what surfaces next is what pushes this from a trending topic into something nobody online is fully prepared for yet. The conversation didn't calm down after the first wave. It actually got louder, more chaotic, and way more fragmented as different corners of the internet started pulling the story in completely opposite directions. Because now it wasn't just about what was originally posted online. It was about everything that started resurfacing after the fact. Old interviews, forgotten social media posts, blurred screenshots, and half-remembered clips were all suddenly being treated like missing pieces of a puzzle people were desperate to solve in real time. And the more people tried to connect it all, the less stable the story became. Stefon Diggs stayed at the center of it all, whether he responded directly or not. Every move he made online, every public appearance, every moment where he didn't say anything at all, it all became part of the narrative. That's how these situations evolve in the social media era. Silence doesn't remove attention, it just makes people fill in the blanks themselves. And those blanks were getting filled fast. Some posts began framing the situation like a hidden timeline that had been building for years without the public fully realizing it. Others pushed back hard, saying the entire discussion was being shaped by speculation, reposted content, and interpretations that had no verified foundation. But neither side was slowing the momentum down. Cardi B's name continued to hover over the entire discussion, not because she was actively driving the conversation, but because the internet kept pulling her into it. Every time a new detail surfaced about Diggs' personal life or past relationships, users would immediately try to map out where Cardi fit or didn't fit into that bigger picture. And that debate alone kept the topic alive on every major platform. Meanwhile, commentary channels and gossip pages started picking apart the situation frame by frame. Not just the claims themselves, but the reactions around them. How people responded emotionally. Who reposted what? Who deleted what? Who stayed silent? It became less about one single accusation and more about a full-scale digital investigation happening in public view. And with that came even more confusion. Because as more voices entered the conversation, the narrative stopped being one story and started becoming 10 different versions of the same story. One version painted Diggs as someone unfairly targeted by internet speculation. Another suggested there were deeper personal issues being ignored. Another focused entirely on how quickly Cardi B's name was being dragged into unrelated conversations. And all of them were spreading at the same time. At this point, even casual observers who didn't normally follow celebrity drama were getting pulled in, simply because the scale of the conversation was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just trending, it was constantly evolving. And then came the shift that changed the tone again. New posts started circulating that claimed to clarify earlier claims, but instead of settling anything, they added more layers to the confusion. People began arguing over what was actually said versus what was interpreted. Screenshots were being analyzed for context. Captions were being dissected word by word. And every new interpretation created a new wave of disagreement. The strange part was how quickly opinion started replacing clarity. People weren't just asking what happened. They were deciding what they believed happened, and then defending that belief like it was confirmed fact. That's when the story stopped behaving like news and started behaving like a cultural argument. And in the middle of that, Stefon Diggs' public image took on a new level of scrutiny. Not because of a single verified event, but because the accumulation of discussion around him started reshaping how audiences perceived everything tied to his name. Even unrelated moments from his past were now being reinterpreted under this new spotlight. Cardi B, on the other hand, remained in a complicated position within the narrative. Her connection was being discussed in so many different ways that it became difficult to separate what was direct relevance from what was audience speculation. Some people argued she was being unfairly used as a reference point in a story that didn't clearly involve her at all. Others insisted that her name kept appearing for a reason the public didn't fully understand yet. And that tension between interpretation and fact is exactly what kept the discussion alive. Because every time the conversation started to slow down, something new would surface. A reposted clip here, a resurfaced comment there, a new thread breaking down old interactions like they were evidence in a case that was still unfolding. And each piece added just enough fuel to keep people engaged without actually delivering full clarity. Media platforms noticed it too. Some outlets leaned into the controversy angle, focusing heavily on the most dramatic interpretations circulating online. Others took a more cautious approach, emphasizing that much of what was being shared remained unverified and largely driven by social media speculation. But regardless of the framing, the attention never dropped. And that attention had consequences, because now every public mention of Diggs or Cardi B carried extra weight. Even unrelated news started getting filtered through the lens of this ongoing conversation. Fans weren't just consuming updates. They were interpreting everything as part of a larger, unfinished narrative. And that's where things started shifting again. A new layer of discussion began forming around how quickly celebrity narratives can spiral once the internet locks onto a storyline. People started debating whether the situation was being driven by real developments or by the sheer momentum of online engagement. Others pointed out that once a narrative reaches a certain scale, it becomes almost impossible to contain, regardless of accuracy. But while those debates were happening, the core situation still hadn't stabilized. Instead, it kept expanding. And just when it seemed like the story had reached its peak intensity, another wave of content started circulating. One that shifted attention once again and raised even more questions about what was actually going on behind the scenes. Because whatever people thought they understood about this situation, it was about to get even more complicated. By the time the next wave hit the internet, the conversation had already gone past normal celebrity drama and entered that unpredictable space where nobody can even agree on what the main story actually is anymore. At this point, Stefon Diggs wasn't just dealing with rumors or online speculation. He had become a central figure in a narrative that kept expanding without a clear boundary. Every new post, every resurfaced clip, every opinion video was adding another layer on top of a situation that already felt overloaded. And the more it grew, the harder it became to separate what was confirmed from what was being assumed. Cardi B's name still kept showing up across discussions, but now the tone had shifted. It wasn't just about connection anymore. It was about impact. People were questioning how much damage online narratives can do when they spiral without verification, and why certain celebrity names become magnets for speculation even when direct involvement isn't clearly established. Meanwhile, Diggs found himself in a position that so many public figures eventually face, where the story being told about him online becomes louder than anything he can realistically respond to. And in this kind of environment, even silence gets interpreted in multiple ways. Some see it as strategy, others see it as avoidance, and neither interpretation can fully be proven right or wrong in real time. What made this final stretch even more intense was how quickly the internet began shifting focus from individual claims to the bigger picture. Instead of arguing about one specific allegation or one specific post, people started talking about patterns, how celebrity controversies build, how narratives spread, and how fast public perception can shift before official clarity ever arrives. And that's when the conversation stopped being just about Diggs and Cardi B and started becoming something larger than both of them. Fans began reflecting on how often celebrity relationships become public battlegrounds where facts, rumors, and interpretations all collide at the same time. One moment something is a trending topic, and the next it's being treated like a full historical timeline, even when the details are still unclear or incomplete. That realization alone started changing how parts of the audience were reacting. At the same time, commentary creators continued breaking down every available fragment of information, but even their interpretations started to diverge more sharply. Some leaned into the idea that there are deeper truths still not fully visible. Others emphasized that the internet has a tendency to turn incomplete narratives into fully formed stories before the facts are even established. And both sides were gaining traction. Cardi B's involvement in the broader conversation remained one of the most sensitive parts of the entire discussion. Not because of anything new being confirmed, but because of how strongly her presence influences public reaction. Every mention of her name shifted engagement levels instantly, which only fueled more discussion, even when the relevance was unclear. But as the narrative stretched further, something interesting started happening in the audience reaction itself. Fatigue began setting in. People who were initially fully engaged started questioning whether they were watching a real unfolding situation or a cycle of recycled speculation being amplified over and over again. That shift didn't stop the conversation, but it changed its tone. Instead of pure shock and reaction, there was now skepticism, debate, and even pushback against how quickly things escalated in the first place. And in the middle of all this noise, the reality remained the same. There was still no fully confirmed, singular version of events that tied everything together in a definitive way. Just overlapping narratives, conflicting interpretations, and a digital environment that rewards attention faster than it rewards accuracy. Stefon Diggs' public image, however, had already been permanently pulled into a much larger conversation about accountability, celebrity scrutiny, and how quickly reputations can shift once the internet decides to focus on someone. Whether he responds further or not, the narrative has already taken on a life of its own. And Cardi B, whether directly involved or not in the way some online discussions suggest, remains a name that keeps amplifying every layer of this story simply by being attached to it in conversation. In the end, what this entire situation shows isn't just about one celebrity or one allegation. It's about how fast modern media cycles can build an entire reality out of fragments, and how difficult it becomes to control that narrative once it reaches critical mass. Because by the time the dust settles on stories like this, the truth people end up remembering isn't always the original event. It's the version the internet built around it. And in this case, that version is still being written. If you've made it all the way to the end of this story, then you already know this situation is nowhere near simple, and it's definitely not something the internet is going to stop talking about anytime soon. But now I want to hear your take on it. Do you think this whole situation is being blown out of proportion by social media? Or is there more going on behind the scenes that people haven't fully understood yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those stories where every new perspective changes the way people see it. And if new updates come out, you're going to want to stay locked in so you don't miss how this develops next. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit the like button so more people can see it, and subscribe to the channel because we cover stories exactly like this, where entertainment, sports, and real-life drama all collide in unexpected ways. Turn on the notification bell too, because the next update in this situation could shift everything again, and you'll want to be the first to know when it happens. Now tell me this, do you think this story is already over, or is the biggest twist still waiting to drop?